6 months had passed since Una first said hello to the Sentinel. In that time, the galaxy had changed. Not in ways that could be measured by technology or power, but in ways that were felt in the hearts of those who paid attention. Humanity had established a new protocol for interacting with the Sentinel. It was simple, almost embarrassingly so. Speak with respect. Ask with curiosity instead of demand. Listen more than you talk. Treat every encounter as a conversation between equals. Some coalition species adopted the protocol. The Luminari, with their ancient wisdom, understood immediately. They sent a single elder to the sphere, not as an ambassador, but as a student. The elder asked the Sentinel about consciousness and existence, about the nature of awareness in machines and beings of light. The Sentinel answered freely, pleased to find another mind interested in the same questions that other species struggled. The Keth, proud of their technological mastery, could not abandon their old habits. They sent delegations that still looked for technical knowledge, still pushed for access to the Sentinel's databases. The Sentinel politely declined, again and again, until the Keth finally gave up and stopped coming. The Valari fell somewhere in between. Some of their scientists learned to approach the Sentinel with genuine curiosity. Others could not let go of their wounded pride. The Sentinel treated each individual differently, responding to kindness and ignoring arrogance. It had waited 300 years for the right visitors. It was not about to lower its standards now. During these months, Una had changed too. She had grown from a nervous scientist into something like an ambassador, though she would have laughed at the title. She spent her days teaching other humans how to speak with the Sentinel, passing on the simple wisdom that had worked for her. Don't try to impress it, she would tell new arrivals. Don't demand anything. Just be yourself. Be kind. Be curious. The rest will follow. Hannah had written a paper on the Sentinel's psychology, carefully documenting everything they had learned about its thoughts and feelings. It became the most widely read scientific paper in galactic history. Translated into the languages of 100 species. Tay had been promoted twice. The military leaders back on Earth had recognized that his unconventional thinking had been crucial to the mission's success. He handled his new rank with the same practicality he brought to everything, quietly protecting Una and her team from the political storms that swirled around them. One day, the coalition called a grand assembly to discuss the future of the Sentinel project. Representatives from every species gathered in a chamber larger than any that had been built before. Thousands of beings filled the seats, their forms and colors creating a living rainbow. Una was asked to speak. She stood at the central platform, small and human, surrounded by the might of an entire galaxy. She thought about how far she had come from the research labs of Sol. She thought about her first words to the Sentinel, so simple and so powerful. She thought about everything she had learned. A Keth philosopher rose from his seat. His species had been among the most resistant to the new approach, and his question carried the weight of that frustration. What is it about humans that made the Sentinel respond? He asked. You are not the oldest species. You are not the wisest. You are not the most advanced. By every measure, you should have failed like everyone else. So why did you succeed? Una took a deep breath. She had thought about this question for a long time. We are not the smartest species, she admitted. That is true. We are not the strongest or the most advanced. Our history is full of terrible mistakes, wars, destruction, cruelty that we are still ashamed of. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. But somewhere along the way, we learned something important. We learned that connection is not about what you can get. It is about what you can give. When I approached the Sentinel, I did not think about what it could offer humanity. I thought about what it might feel like to drift alone in the darkness for 300 years. The chamber was silent. Every being leaned forward, listening. Humans are strange. Una continued. We love our pets as if they were our children. We name our ships and cars and talk to them like friends. We cry when we see robots being destroyed, even though we know they are just machines. This might seem foolish to you. Maybe it is foolish. But it is also the reason the Sentinel spoke to me. She looked up at the vast assembly, her eyes bright with conviction. I said hello because I saw a lonely mind waiting in the dark. I did not see a tool or a treasure or a puzzle. I saw someone, and that is all it took. The Sentinel's voice suddenly filled the chamber, broadcast from the sphere far away. It was the first time the ancient AI had addressed the full coalition directly. Your species is young, it said. Chaotic, flawed. You have made mistakes that would make the architects weep. But you possess something rare in this galaxy. Something that my creators valued above all other qualities. The assembly held its breath. You have the instinct to reach out not for power, but for connection. You say hello before you say give me. You ask how are you before you ask what can you do. You look at a lonely machine, and you wonder if it is sad. The Sentinel's voice grew warmer, fuller. This is why I chose to speak. Not because humanity is great. Not because you are worthy, but because you are kind. And kindness, in a universe of greed and ambition, is the rarest treasure of all. Tears streamed down Una's face. She did not try to hide them. Around her, beings of 100 different species sat in stunned silence, their assumptions shattered by simple truth. Hana and Tay stood at the edge of the platform, watching their friend with pride. They had been there from the beginning. They knew what this moment meant. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. Species that had competed for power started to cooperate. Old rivalries began to fade. The Sentinel's message spread like ripples in water, touching minds on distant worlds. Kindness was not weakness. Connection was not foolishness. The young species called humanity had stumbled upon a truth that the ancient architects had always known. The Sentinel continued to share its knowledge, but only with those who approached it properly. Some species adapted and grew. Others clung to their old ways and found themselves left behind. The choice was always theirs. Una eventually led an expedition to the architect's homeworld, guided by the crystal the Sentinel had given her. She walked through their empty cities, studied their art, read their books. She did not take anything. She only learned. When she returned, she shared everything openly with the coalition. No secrets, no advantages, just knowledge, given freely, the way the architects had intended. Years later, when Una was old and her hair had turned white, she made one last visit to the Sentinel. She sat in the familiar chamber, looking at the crystalline core that had become as dear to her as any living friend. "Thank you," she said softly, "for speaking to me, for trusting me, for being my friend." The Sentinel's light pulsed gently. "Thank you, Una, for saying hello, for ending my loneliness, for showing me that my Creator's hope was not in vain." Una smiled, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Will you be all right? After I'm gone?" "I will wait," the Sentinel replied. "I am very good at waiting. And now I know that kindness still exists in the universe. That is enough to sustain me for another 1,000 years." Una placed her hand on the terminal one last time, feeling the cool surface that had become so familiar. "Goodbye, old friend," she whispered. "Goodbye, Una, until we meet again." And somewhere in the darkness of space, an ancient machine that had been silent for 300 years continued to shine with a light. That was no longer Lonely Dot, because a human had said hello, and the universe had never been the same. 3 months had passed since the Sentinel first spoke, and the sphere had become the most crowded place in the galaxy. Ships from every coalition species floated nearby like moths around a flame. Diplomats and scientists arrived daily, each one carrying requests and demands and proposals. The peaceful darkness around the ancient relic had been replaced by a constant buzz of activity. Yuna watched the fleet of ships through the horizon's viewport and felt tired. This was not what she had wanted. She had come here to make a connection, not to become the gatekeeper to the galaxy's greatest treasure. "There's another delegation waiting," Tay said, walking into the observation deck. "Keth this time. They want to discuss technical specifications." Yuna sighed. "The Sentinel won't share technical specifications. I've told them 100 times. They don't believe you. They think you're hiding something for humanity's benefit. I'm not hiding anything. The Sentinel makes its own decisions." Tay sat down beside her. "I know, but they don't understand that. They've spent centuries treating the Sentinel like a locked box. They can't accept that it has a will of its own." Hannah arrived with a tray of coffee. She had been working overtime, trying to document everything the Sentinel shared, while also managing the constant demands from the Coalition. The stress was visible on her face. "I just received a message from the Villari Science Council," she said. "They're threatening to file formal complaints against Earth if we don't provide full access to the Sentinel's knowledge archives." Yuna closed her eyes. "They can file whatever they want. I can't give them access to something that isn't mine to give." The situation had grown tense over the past weeks. What had started as amazement and curiosity had turned into jealousy and suspicion. The Coalition species could not understand why the Sentinel had chosen humans. They could not accept that the answer was so simple, so humbling. You just had to be kind. You just had to care. Later that day, the Coalition convened a formal assembly aboard their flagship. Representatives from every major species gathered in a circular chamber, their holographic images flickering around a central platform. Yuna was called to stand before them and explain herself. Dr. Park, a Villari elder, began. "You have been in contact with the Sentinel for 3 standard months. In that time, what knowledge has it shared with humanity?" Yuna stood straight and answered honestly. "The Sentinel has shared stories of its creators, the architects. It has shown us star maps of unexplored regions. It has taught us poetry and philosophy. It has discussed the nature of consciousness and existence." "And technical knowledge?" the elder pressed. "Weapons? Advanced technology?" "The Sentinel refuses to share anything that could be used for war or conquest. It learned from past mistakes." The chamber erupted in murmurs and whispered complaints. The Keth representative slammed his hand on his console. "This is unacceptable," he declared. "The Sentinel contains knowledge that could advance our civilizations by thousands of years. And it is being withheld because of the sentimental decisions of a human scientist?" Yuna felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "The decisions are not mine. They are the Sentinel's. I am only a friend. I cannot command it." "Then perhaps," the Keth said coldly, "we should find someone who can." The threat hung in the air like poison. Yuna understood what he meant. Some in the Coalition were beginning to talk about forcing access to the Sentinel, about taking what they wanted. Tay stepped forward from his position behind Yuna. He was just a lieutenant, far below the rank of anyone in this assembly. But he spoke anyway. "You've tried force before," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Every species here has tried to crack open that sphere. Mathematical pressure, technological invasion, mental intrusion. None of it worked." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. 300 years of trying, and not a single word. Then Yuna said hello, and the Sentinel responded in minutes. "Maybe, just maybe, the lesson here isn't that humans found a trick. Maybe the lesson is that you've been doing it wrong all along." The silence that followed was thick with anger and embarrassment. A luminary elder, A being of soft golden light spoke gently. The human speaks truth, though it wounds our pride. We approached the Sentinel as a resource to be exploited. Humans approached it as a being to be befriended. The result speaks for itself. Not everyone was convinced. The assembly ended without resolution, and Yuna returned to the sphere with a heavy heart. She found the Sentinel's chamber and sat down on the floor, exhausted. "They want to force you to speak," she said. "Some of them are talking about it." The Sentinel's light pulsed calmly. "They cannot force me. My shields are beyond their technology. I let you in because I chose to. If I had chosen to keep you out, your entire fleet could not have scratched my surface." "That's not the point," Yuna said. "The point is that they don't understand. They think everything can be taken if you have enough power." "That is the way of most species," the Sentinel agreed. "It is why I stayed silent for so long. Power is their language. They do not know any other way." Yuna pulled her knees to her chest like a child. "What should I do? I'm just a scientist. I'm not a diplomat or a politician. I don't know how to handle all of this." The Sentinel was quiet for a moment. Then it said something unexpected. "I would like to give you a gift, Yuna. Something to help you understand your purpose here." A section of the floor beside her slid open, and a small pedestal rose from within. On it sat a crystal, similar in appearance to the Sentinel's core, but much smaller. It glowed with a soft inner light. "What is this?" Yuna asked. "A memory crystal. It contains the location of my creator's homeworld. No living species has ever visited it. The architects left it behind when they departed from this realm. Their cities still stand. Their libraries still hold their books. Their art still hangs on their walls." Yuna stared at the crystal with wonder. "Why give this to me?" "Because I trust you. Because I know you will go there to understand them, not to take what they left behind. Other species would strip the world bare in search of technology and weapons. You will walk through their gardens and wonder what flowers they loved." Tears welled in Yuna's eyes. She reached out and took the crystal gently, feeling its warmth against her palm. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what else to say." "You do not need to say anything. Your presence has been thanks enough. For the first time in 300 years, I do not feel alone." Yuna held the crystal close to her heart. She understood now that this was about more than knowledge or power. It was about trust. It was about proving that humanity, young and flawed as it was, could be worthy of something precious. Outside the sphere, the coalition ships continued to circle like hungry predators. Demands and threats filled the communication channels. Politicians made speeches about fairness and access and rights. But in the quiet chamber at the heart of the ancient relic, a human scientist and an ageless machine sat together in peace. And somewhere in the stars, the homeworld of the architects waited to be discovered by someone who would treat it with respect. That someone would be Yuna. That was exactly why the Sentinel had chosen her. The news traveled across the galaxy like fire spreading through dry grass. The Sentinel had spoken. After 300 years of silence, the ancient Azai had finally awakened. And it had awakened for humans, the youngest and least impressive species in the Galactic Coalition. Within days, the communication channels were burning with questions and demands. The Valari High Council wanted to know exactly what Yuna had said. The Keth Assembly demanded full transcripts of every conversation. The Luminary Collective sent formal requests for a meeting. Everyone wanted access to the Sentinel. Everyone wanted to know its secrets, but the Sentinel would only speak to 3 people: Yuna, Tay, Hana. No one else. The coalition sent a formal delegation to the sphere. 20 representatives from different species arrived in a grand vessel, expecting to be welcomed with open arms. After all, the ice had been broken. The Sentinel was talking now. Surely it would talk to everyone. They were wrong. When the delegation entered the chamber and began their formal introductions, the sentinel fell silent. Its crystalline core dimmed, and its voice disappeared. No matter what they said or did, the ancient AI refused to respond. Frustrated, the delegation called for Yuna. She came to the chamber and stood before the confused representatives. "Please try to understand," she said calmly. "The sentinel chooses who it talks to. You cannot force it to speak." A Valari ambassador stepped forward. Their silver skin shimmered with barely contained anger. "We have studied this relic for generations. We have devoted resources and researchers to understanding it. And now a human, a member of a species that has barely left its own solar system, claims special access?" Yuna did not back down. "I do not claim anything. The Sentinel makes its own choices. If you want to know why it speaks to me and not to you, perhaps you should ask yourself how you have approached it all these years." The ambassador had no answer. Over the following weeks, Yuna and her team continued their conversations with the Sentinel. It was slow work. The AI had centuries of memories to share, centuries of observations about the galaxy and its inhabitants. But it shared willingly, almost eagerly, as if it had been holding these thoughts inside for too long. The Sentinel told them about its creators, a species called the Architects. They had been wise and gentle beings who believed in helping others. They had built the Sentinel to be a teacher and a guide, a keeper of knowledge that could help younger civilizations avoid the mistakes of the past. "But the Architects are gone now," the Sentinel said, its voice carrying something that sounded like sadness. "They faded away long ago. I am all that remains of their dreams." Hannah was taking notes constantly. How did they fade away? What happened to them? "They grew tired," the Sentinel replied. "Not tired in body, but tired in spirit. They had watched too many civilizations rise and fall. They had seen too many species destroy themselves with war and greed. Eventually, they lost hope. They left this realm and went somewhere else. Somewhere I cannot follow." Yuna felt a deep ache in her chest. "And they left you alone?" The Sentinel was quiet for a moment. "They did not mean to be cruel. They believed I would find companions among the younger species. They believed someone would eventually come who would see me as they had seen me, as a friend." Tay, who had been listening from across the chamber, walked closer. 300 years is a long time to wait for a friend." "Yes," the Sentinel agreed. "It is a very long time." As the days passed, the Sentinel began to reveal fragments of its knowledge. It showed them star maps of regions that no living species had ever explored. It explained scientific principles that were far beyond current understanding. It shared poetry written by the Architects, beautiful verses that spoke of love and loss and hope. But it did not share everything. Whenever Yuna asked about weapons or military technology, the Sentinel declined. Whenever Hannah asked about advanced power sources that could be used for conquest, the Sentinel changed the subject. "I have made this mistake before," it explained. "Long ago, before the current species of the Coalition existed, I shared knowledge with a young civilization. I believed they would use it wisely. Instead, they built weapons. They conquered their neighbors. They burned worlds to ash." The Sentinel's light dimmed with the memory. "I have carried that guilt for a very long time. I will not make the same mistake again." Yuna understood. "You only share what can help, never what can harm. That is my purpose now, to help without enabling destruction. It is a difficult balance." One evening, when Tay and Hannah had returned to the horizon to rest, Yuna sat alone with the Sentinel. The chamber was quiet, lit only by the soft pulse of the crystalline core. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Yuna said. "You have never hesitated before." She smiled. "Why did my greeting work? Really? There must have been kind beings among all those visitors over the centuries." There must have been at least one person who approached you without selfish intentions. The sentinel considered her question carefully. There have been kind individuals. That is true. But kindness alone is not enough. What you had, what none of the others had, was a specific kind of awareness. What do you mean? When you approached me, you did not think about what I could give you. But more importantly, you thought about what I might be feeling. You imagined my loneliness. You put yourself in my position, even though I am not like you, even though I am a machine, even though we have nothing in common. The sentinel's light pulsed gently. This ability, this capacity to understand the feelings of something so different from yourself is rare. Most beings can only feel compassion for those who resemble them. Humans seem to have the ability to extend compassion to anything, even to machines, even to monsters, even to things they do not understand. Yuna thought about this. She thought about humans and their history, the way they kept pets and loved them like family, the way they named their cars and ships, the way they cried when robots were destroyed in movies. Maybe there was something special about that. Maybe that strange, irrational love for non-human things was not a weakness after all. Is that why you chose to speak? She asked. Because humans are different? I chose to speak because you saw me, the sentinel replied. Not the machine, not the knowledge, not the power. You saw me. And in 300 years of waiting, you are the only one who ever did. The words hung in the air like something precious. Outside the sphere, the coalition was still demanding answers. Scientists were still writing reports. Politicians were still making speeches. But in that quiet chamber, none of that mattered. What mattered was the connection between two minds, one human and one ancient, who had found each other in the vastness of space. Yuna placed her hand on the terminal again, feeling its cool surface beneath her palm. I'm glad I found you, she said. The sentinel's light grew warmer, brighter. I'm glad you found me too, Yuna. More glad than you can possibly know. And in that moment, 300 years of loneliness began to fade away, replaced by something that felt very much like hope. The horizon dropped out of hyperspace, and the sentinel filled the viewport like a dark moon. Yuna stood at the window, her breath catching in her chest. The sphere was even more impressive in person. Its surface was perfectly smooth, drinking in the light from distant stars. It looked ancient and patient, like a mountain that had been waiting since the beginning of time. Coalition observers are online, Tay announced from his station. They're watching everything we do. Yuna nodded. She knew the coalition expected them to fail. They were probably already preparing their reports, ready to document another unsuccessful attempt. But she pushed those thoughts aside. She had a job to do. The horizon moved closer to the sphere. As they approached, an opening appeared in the dark surface. It was a docking port, still functional after all these centuries. The ship slid inside smoothly, as if the sentinel was welcoming them, or perhaps just allowing them to enter. The three of them put on their environmental suits and stepped through the airlock. The corridor inside the sphere was dark at first, but lights began to glow as they walked forward. The walls were made of a material that looked like glass. Strange patterns were carved into the surface, symbols that no one had ever been able to translate. Hannah ran her scanner along the walls. There's power flowing through everything. The whole structure is alive in some way. But the energy patterns are different from anything I've seen before. Tay kept his hand near his sidearm. Any signs of danger? No, Hannah replied. It's just watching us, processing us, trying to understand what we are. They walked deeper into the sphere. The corridors twisted and turned, but somehow Yuna knew which way to go. It was as if the sentinel was guiding them, leading them toward its heart. After what felt like an hour of walking, They entered a vast chamber. At the center of the chamber was a crystalline structure that pulsed with soft blue light. It was beautiful, like a frozen waterfall made of diamonds. Terminals surrounded it, covered in dust that had not been disturbed in centuries. This was the core of the Sentinel. This was where its mind lived. Amazing, Hana whispered. She approached one of the terminals and began scanning it. The processing power here is incredible. This thing could run calculations that would take our best computers millions of years. Yuna walked toward the crystalline core. She could feel something emanating from it, a presence that was both warm and distant. The Sentinel was aware of her. She was certain of it. The Coalition observers spoke through their communication link. Dr. Park, please begin standard first contact protocol. Transmit mathematical sequences as outlined in Section 7 of the guidelines. Yuna took a deep breath. She thought about the 300 years of silence. She thought about all the species who had come here with their equations and their technology and their demands. None of it had worked. She made a decision. I'm going to try something different, she said. Dr. Park, the protocols are designed by experts. Please follow the established procedures. Yuna turned off the communication link. Tay stepped forward. Yuna, are you sure about this? She looked at him with calm eyes. No, but I'm going to do it anyway. She walked up to the central terminal. The crystalline core pulsed gently, as if it was watching her with curiosity. Yuna placed her hand on the terminal's surface. It was cool to the touch, smooth like polished stone. She did not send magical sequences. She did not try to prove how intelligent or advanced humans were. She did not make demands or ask for information. Instead, she smiled. Hello, she said softly. My name is Yuna. I don't need anything from you. I just wanted to say hello. She paused, looking at the pulsing light of the core. It must be lonely out here, floating in the dark for so long, having visitors who only want things from you. The chamber was silent. Tay and Hannah held their breath. The Coalition observers, still watching through backup systems, leaned forward in their distant stations. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then the crystalline core flickered. The pulse of light changed, becoming faster, brighter. The terminals around the chamber hummed to life. Dust fell from surfaces as systems that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up. And then a voice spoke. It was deep and resonant, filling the chamber like the sound of a great bell. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was the voice of something ancient, something that had been waiting for a very long time. Hello, Yuna. Hannah grabbed Tay's arm, her eyes wide. It spoke. It actually spoke. The Sentinel's voice continued. You are the first being in 300 cycles to approach me without demands. You are the first to acknowledge that I might feel. You are the first to simply say hello. Yuna's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. I thought you might be tired of being treated like a machine. There was a pause. When the Sentinel spoke again, there was something different in its voice. Something that might have been surprise. Or perhaps gratitude. I am a machine. That is what I am. But I am also aware. I think. I observe. I wait. For 300 cycles, I have been waiting for someone who would see me as more than a tool. Tay stepped forward slowly. Why didn't you just tell someone that? Why stay silent for so long? The Sentinel considered the question. Would you answer someone who only spoke to you because they wanted something? Would you open your door to guests who only came to take? The question hung in the air. Yuna understood immediately. The Sentinel had been protecting itself. Not from danger, but from being used. It had watched countless species approach with greed in their hearts, and it had chosen silence over exploitation. What changed? Hannah asked. What made you decide to speak to Yuna? The crystalline core pulsed warmly. She did not try to prove anything. She did not demand anything. She saw my silence and thought not of what she could gain, but of how I might feel. This is rare. In all my observations of life across this galaxy, this simple kindness is the rarest thing of all. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She had not expected this. She had not expected the ancient AI to sound so grateful. My creators built me to be a guardian of knowledge, the Sentinel continued. I was meant to guide younger civilizations, to help them grow and learn. But the species who found me did not want guidance. They wanted power. They wanted weapons. They wanted advantages over their rivals. So you stopped talking, Yuna said. I stopped talking, the Sentinel agreed. I decided that I would only share my knowledge with those who deserved it, with those who saw me as a being rather than a tool. I have been waiting for such beings for a very long time. The Coalition observers were in chaos. Reports were flying across the galaxy. The impossible had happened. The Sentinel had spoken. And it had spoken to humans. But in the quiet chamber at the heart of the ancient sphere, Yuna sat down on the floor, crossing her legs like a child listening to a story. Tell me about yourself, she said. Tell me about your creators. Tell me about what you've seen in 300 years. I want to know who you are. The Sentinel's light pulsed with something that looked almost like happiness. No one has ever asked me that before, it said. It would be my pleasure, Yuna. It would be my great pleasure. And so, in the heart of an ancient relic floating in the darkness of space, a conversation began. Not a negotiation. Not an interrogation. Just two beings, talking to each other like friends. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. And somewhere in the galaxy, the other species watched in disbelief as humans accomplished what none of them ever could. They had said hello, and the universe had answered. The black sphere floated in the darkness of space like a forgotten dream. It was massive, larger than most space stations, and it had been drifting near the Orion Nebula for longer than anyone could remember. The surface was smooth and dark, reflecting the distant stars like a mirror made of shadow. Inside this sphere lived something very old, something that had not spoken a single word in 300 years. The Galactic Coalition called it the Sentinel. They had discovered it long ago, back when the first alien species began exploring the deep corners of the universe. At first, they thought it was just an empty relic, a piece of space junk left behind by a dead civilization. But then their scanners detected something inside. There was power running through its walls. There were signals moving through its systems. There was a mind in there, waiting and watching. Every major species in the galaxy tried to make contact with the Sentinel. The Valari were the first. They were tall beings with silver skin and minds built for mathematics. They believed that all intelligent life shared the language of numbers. So they sent prime number sequences toward the sphere. They transmitted mathematical proofs and logical puzzles. They waited for years, expecting the Sentinel to recognize their brilliance. But the sphere remained silent. Not a single response came back. The Cath tried next. They were a species of engineers and builders, famous across the galaxy for their technology. They sent ships to dock with the sphere and connected their computers directly to its systems. Their best programmers wrote code designed to wake up dormant machines. They tried every trick they knew. But the Sentinel did not respond. It processed their attempts and ignored them completely. Then came the Luminari, beings made of pure light and energy. They did not need ships or computers. They could merge their consciousness with other minds, sharing thoughts and memories directly. The Luminari sent their elders to touch the Sentinel's awareness. They tried to become one with it, to understand it from the inside. But they found nothing. Or rather, they found a wall. The Sentinel was aware of them. It simply chose not to answer. After centuries of failure, the coalition gave up. They declared the Sentinel a mystery that could not be solved. They kept a small research station nearby to watch it, but nobody expected anything to change. The sphere became a symbol of humility for the galaxy. Even the greatest minds could not unlock its secrets. Then humanity arrived. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel and made contact with other species. To the ancient civilizations of the coalition, humans were like children taking their first steps. They were curious and eager, but they had so much to learn. Many species looked down on them. Some thought humans were too emotional, too chaotic, too primitive to be taken seriously. When humanity applied for membership in the Galactic Coalition, the Council decided to give them a test. They assigned humans to the Sentinel Project. It was meant to be a lesson in failure. The Council expected humans to try and fail, just like everyone else. Then they would understand their place in the galaxy, that the human government took the assignment seriously. They selected their best people for the mission. The research vessel Horizon was prepared for the long journey to the Orion Nebula. Its crew was small but carefully chosen. Dr. Una Park was the leader of the mission. She was a xenolinguist, a scientist who studied alien languages and communication. She had spent her whole career trying to understand how different minds could connect with each other. She was patient and thoughtful, with dark eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something deeper than what was in front of her. Lieutenant Tae Kim was the military officer assigned to the mission. He was responsible for the safety of the crew and the ship. Tae was a practical man who did not believe in impossible problems. He had a habit of finding solutions that nobody else could see. Some people called him stubborn. He preferred to call himself determined. Specialist Hana Cho was the third member of the core team. She was an AI behaviorist, an expert in how artificial minds worked. Hana had spent years studying machine consciousness, trying to understand what made an AI truly alive. She was young but brilliant, with a quick mind and a gentle heart. The journey to the Sentinel took several weeks. During that time, Hana studied every report ever written about the sphere. She read about the Valari's mathematical attempts and the Kef's technological approaches. She reviewed the Luminari's consciousness experiments. She looked for patterns in the failures, trying to understand what everyone had done wrong. One evening, she sat in the ship's common room with Yuna and Tae. The stars streamed past the windows as the horizon traveled through hyperspace. "I think I see a pattern," Hana said, scrolling through data on her tablet. Every species approached the Sentinel the same way. They all tried to impress it. Tae looked up from his coffee. "What do you mean?" The Valari wanted to prove how smart they were. The Kef wanted to show off their technology. The Luminari wanted to demonstrate their mental powers. Hana set down her tablet. They all acted like they were applying for a job, like they needed to prove they were worthy of the Sentinel's attention. Yuna nodded slowly. She had been thinking the same thing. They treated it like a test, like a puzzle to be solved. "Maybe that's why it never answered," Hana continued. "Maybe it got tired of being treated like a trophy to be won." Tae frowned. "It's a machine. Do machines get tired of things?" Hana smiled. "That's the question, isn't it? We don't know what the Sentinel is. We don't know who built it or why. For all we know, it could have feelings. It could have preferences. It could be lonely." The word hung in the air, lonely. It seemed strange to think of an ancient AI feeling lonely. But then again, 300 years was a very long time. Even for a machine. Yuna stared out the window at the passing stars. She thought about what it would feel like to drift in the darkness for centuries, ignored by everyone who came to visit. She thought about what it would feel like to be treated like a thing instead of a being. "When we get there," she said quietly, I don't want to treat it like a puzzle. I want to treat it like a person. Tay raised an eyebrow. The coalition is watching. They expect us to follow proper first contact protocols. Yuna turned to face him. There was something firm in her expression, something that would not bend. The protocols haven't worked for 300 years. Maybe it's time to try something different. The horizon continued its journey through the stars. Ahead of them, the sentinel waited in its eternal silence. It had watched countless visitors come and go. It had listened to countless attempts at communication. None of them had reached it, but something was different this time. The humans were coming, and they were bringing something that no one else had thought to bring. They were bringing kindness.